Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm at Capola HQ today. Thanks to the Capolas for hosting and allowing me to do this episode here with my man Steve. So good to have you back. We had the guest last episode talk pre-draft, pre-free agency, and thank goodness we got that out of the way because bombshell trade last night announced by Emily Kaplan on the draft floor after what the second or third pick. The New York Rangers trade for Pavel Dorofeyev. They draft Albert Smits. And on top of it, they made two other trades with young prospects. So, Steve-O, a lot to unpack here. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it. Let's talk some puck. And I want to get your reaction first. What was your first reaction? Overall, you give me a reaction to the Dorofeyev news, overall the draft. Give me a reaction.
I'm excited this episode, and I feel like for anyone in this space, we've talked so about this season some dreadful conversations that just felt like they would never end. The season would never end. So this is exciting. I think it's time to bring the energy. And can't lie, when they announced that, I mean, I was with my parents. Like we all lurched on the couch. It was one of those lean in moments where you're like, did they just say the New York Rangers? Like this was just dropped on air. There was no graphic to go along with it. Loved it. So that reaction was a crazy high. And then you think maybe Reed is available for them to take at 5. They take Schmitz, who was their guy the whole time. So there was like a low for a moment, then another high. Like it was just a crazy few minutes. And I said to my parents, like, that line from The Sopranos, they pull me back in. Like they just always find a way to pull us back in, Steve. But I know you weren't able to actually keep up, like you weren't watching the television program. So what was your reaction? Like, I don't know if you were getting the news from me or if you were seeing it.
Bro, I got the news from you. you texted me first. You beat Bleacher Report. You beat everything that I had. And I'm pumped, man. I was always a Dorofeyev fan. He
Hmm.
checked virtually every box for us. I mean, we're a young team. We're searching for young talent. We're searching for offensive game changers, and he's exactly that. At that price it cost to acquire him, I think this was nothing short of a home run. I mean, rarely. I mean, we're getting into grades already. Rarely do you see me give an A+ for a move, but I love this move. This is an A+ move. I mean, skating isn't, if you don't know Dorofeyev, skating isn't his specialty, but he makes up for that with, you ready for it? You know what I'm going to say? And I'm most excited about his elite finishing touch. I mean, he is so good at that. If you watch Vegas, if you watch the playoffs, you know that he has that. I mean, and we need goal scoring, and he is that guy. I mean, I'm so excited. He's going to provide such an instant offensive boost and really bluster a power play that was already dim for most of the year last year. I mean, he is a power play merchant. I mean, he's so good. He's going to improve the power play as a whole, but he's also going to play very well with Adam Fox. He might elevate other guys too on the power play, which we've seen other guys haven't been able to get going on the power play. So I'm very excited about this. I give it an A+. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, listen, man, it's Saturday when we're recording this Sunday. Tomorrow, I'm going to go with the grocery list of a few things I think of. One, Stanley Cup final experience. He had to go through a playoff run. He's been in a program that has competed for years, high demand. They've had some situations that they had to overcome, right? Obviously, they fire Cassidy, they bring in Torts. He's still scoring. Like that didn't affect him. 25 years old. You mentioned the Rangers had to get younger. Now all of their wingers are below like 25 years old. He might be the oldest winger on the roster. He didn't score in those 8 of the 9 last games. He did score 2 goals in game 5 of that series. So that's just like a small thing that I don't think I'm necessarily worried about. Some people really were. So I'll definitely want to put that to bed early. Like I'm not worried about that right now where the Rangers are. Steve-O, this is a goal scorer. I tweeted earlier, like the last pure goal scorer, Marian Gaborik, was at the end of his career, like really towards the end of the line. When he was in New York, had some injury issues, coaching issues with Torts and relationship there. But like, who was the last pure sniper? Vetrano, the stint we had of him, Tarasenko in theory, Mike Gartner in the 90s, like pure goal scorer, not Rick Nash, who turned into a two-way forward, not Mark Messier, Captain Clutch, like goal scorer. This is what's awesome to me. Like you said, 49 goals between regular season playoffs last year. And here's my hot take, Steve. I think this is going to benefit Alexi Lafreniere, whether it's just on the power play or whether this is they're eventually line mates, which I'd really like to see them as line mates. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in this proposal that I have, as if I'm talking to Chris Drury himself. If you have Perot activate JT Miller as the second line center, if that's even the situation, if Trocheck stays, then we'll see what they decide with the top six. I'd love to see Dorofeyev with Zibanejad, like a pure scorer with Zibanejad, and then that opens up Lafreniere to play make. Like I think this has levels to it. He's somewhat one-dimensional in his game, but his finishing is what's going to be the final touch to that top six. So it's so exciting to feel like you have a goal scorer that you didn't have to give up so much for, right? Like,
Yes.
what was your opinion on the return? What the Rangers traded?
Yeah, I thought this was a great move. It wouldn't have come to a surprise if you told me before, and this really came out of the blue. I did not see Dorofeyev coming, but if you told me, we're gonna go out there and trade for Dorofeyev, I would not be surprised if we gave up the fifth overall pick to Vegas. He's such a rising talent. And you really do have to give Jury his credit here, because he
Hmm.
managed to hold on to the number fifth pick. He also managed to hold on to Vincent Trocheck, um, Braden Schneider. That one's a little questionable. Um, but you have to give him credit because he didn't really give up, wow, a big hole in order to get Dorofeyev. That's why I think it's such a great move. But at the same time, this was also a salary dump for a Vegas team. Vegas for the last
Hmm.
couple of years has been very squeezed by the cap. They still need to sign Anderson on their defensive side of things. So and they got Eichel, they got Marner, they got Stone. I mean, they got a lot of people in the cap. So I mean, they were not going to be able to re-sign Dorofeyev for the contract that we gave him. So they had to dump him. We took advantage of that. That's why I love it. I think it's great. I'm so happy, man. This is great.
I love to see you smile ear to ear, Steve-O. It's a welcome sight. Like you said too, I think for the rain, like this also was a good situation overall. Vegas had to sign players, and not necessarily that I care that much about their situation, but for the Rangers, it wasn't a move that. Um, well, first, I think it signifies a retool, not a rebuild. But I also think this was a move that did play into their favor. It wasn't a move where they had to like move so much around or trade another asset to another team to make this work, which I feel like has been part of Drury's tenure too. So I give him a lot of credit for swinging big. We talked about it last episode. He'll swing big sometimes and it doesn't come to fruition or really is not a good move. And I think for many reasons, this is a great move. So I think his back was on the ground and he was able to kind of kip up from this. So he's kind of hanging in the fight still. Even though I'm sure this doesn't necessarily repair what fans think of the general manager of the New York Rangers. Like you said, I you have to give him credit for this one.
Yeah, you do. And I think two other things that excite me, and one of them really is not talked about a lot. When the other one you just mentioned, so I'll go back to it, is how good at finishing he is. Because you mentioned the comparisons to a Vetrano esque type of player. You know, it's so hard. You look at our players like Mika. Like Mika's got to be in a spot. He's got to have his wind up. He's got to have his shot. We miss a player like that where Vetrano could snipe it from any moment. You just give him the puck. He could, turn a tough, tricky shot, into a goal. And I think that's a type of player that we don't have in our system, which I'm most excited about. And I think the other thing, which I really haven't heard anyone talk about, is his defense. I think that Dorofeyev is an incredibly effective two-way forward. I think he's going to help out much on the defensive side of things because let's be honest, Lafreniere and others, on the defensive side of things, we're not playing the best of hockey last year, especially during the tough streaks. So I think Dorofeyev, he's a great defender. He's going to help out in terms of defense. So this move, is very exciting. Now, I know you're a half glass, half, empty kind of guy. So we can look at the full picture. And I do think you mentioned one risk. I'll give you another. I do think that Dorofeyev certainly benefited from sharing a uniform with Eichel and Marner.
Mhm.
We don't have that ability to move the puck like they do, and I certainly think that Dorofeyev is cashed out. Especially playing alongside them, especially on the power play. But I think it's worth wondering. This is more of posing a question. But I'm curious to see if we can maximize um Dorofeyev's talents, effectively as Vegas did. And I do want to say that we are excited, but it is very important to say that we aren't one move away from
Mhm.
reclaiming our status as Stanley Cup contenders, and that, like most Ranger
Yeah.
fans, we're excited. But we know that Dorofeyev, if he's on the Rangers last year, he was not curing a disastrous season that we had. But I do think that he's a needle moving in the right direction, and that's what excites me.
You know what, Steve? I really like that you said that because something I think too is I've seen like some people in our comments are talking about well, you essentially took the money that you could have paid Panarin in some sense, and now you're paying Dorofeyev. So now you just brought a guy in and like Panarin didn't help this situation. So how will Dorofeyev? Well, this contract over time, the value will drop. I think where this was also just a perfect right time, right situation in place for the Rangers is this contract will not be paid out like $11 million in 2025, 2024, 2023. This is going to be $11 million. Insert every single the cap's going up clip that we have from this year. The cap is going up. By 2032, the value of this is down to 7 million or the equivalent of a $7 million contract. And this is a 25-year-old player. Like that's when he's just getting to that age where he's a little bit older. I also think what you said, like this move will benefit the team in the future too. Like I don't think it's you're bringing a player in at 30 and he just scored 37 goals and you're paying him for immediate goal scoring help and then you'll figure it out later for the next general manager or something. You're bringing in a guy that did this at 25. So you're hoping that ceiling is either higher or even if the team isn't as successful next year or he doesn't produce as much next year, that down the line you're going to set him up to be in that situation. And he's committed long term. So I actually think Shesterkin and Dorofeyev share the same agent. So that I think played into it too.
Good. That's a great point you make. I love that. Thanks for bringing that up about the salary cap because, with the salary cap rising each year, you're seeing star talent becoming a very increasingly, or very increasingly scarce than we're used to seeing it back, when we were in high school, and that's because there's a real incentive in this league, in today's age to lock up young players as the salary cap continues to rise. And I think that's what Jury did here. Locked him up. A lot of hockey to play, but that's why I give it an A plus. Rare A plus from Steve. I love it.
I love that, Steve. I love add that plus, baby. And I think we'd be remiss. We talked about this for about 13 minutes now, but to move on to Albert's Schmitz at number 5 overall. Um, we just talked for a span of time breaking down the Dorofeyev trade. But these moves happen within minutes. So I think that also made last night very exciting and exhilarating. Something I don't think, we felt in a little while with this club. And the Schmitz pick at first, I thought to myself, well, Chase Reed was available. And he was the player touted as maybe having the skill set that allows him to become a star. But what this signified to me was retool because the Rangers left D side right now is Gavrikov, your man, Steve-O, Vakanainen, and Robertson. I really liked Robertson. I'd like to see him on this team next year. Gavrikov, unless he's traded or he waives his no move clause or something that he literally signed last summer, I think he stays for now, or at least he's going to secure that top spot. The Rangers make this pick knowing that Schmitz can step up into the 2 lefty spot next year. And although it's still a point of contention online, I'd like to hear your thoughts because I've come around to this pick.
Yeah, I think you are going to shine more than me when it comes to this. But I think they picked him because he seemed, you are right. He seems like he is considered the most NHL ready defenseman. And I think that's why we jumped on him. Nothing's guaranteed in this league, especially when it comes to us and prospects and number one picks. But I don't think it's impossible that he could be in the Rangers lineup next season. At any point, and with the way they're talking about how NHL ready he could be. And this was a strong defenseman draft class, and that seemed to be the
Yeah.
strategy too. But it is important. You look at what we needed, and defense is everything. The last 2 seasons our defense has really crumbled, and it's made it even harder for our offense. And I think he has all the makings of a long-term answer on the left side of our defensive corps. And the early reports are that he's going to sign his entry level contract, and that's expected. Nobody did not expect that. But I want to hear from you. Why do you think we went with him over Reed?
So I like what my brother said actually when I was talking to him in the car right here today. He said, which I've seen online too, like this is a Chris Drury pick, right? Like big physical, has that edge. They said it on air last night too on both the Sportsnet and ESPN broadcast. Like this is a Chris Drury pick. They had their eyes on him this whole time. Now, what excites me about Schmitz is that he has the slap shot. So he has the shot, he has the size, but coupled with that, because that at first I was like, is that really a number 5 overall pick? Because they picked Emery 2 years back with the same intention with what the 30th pick. They were 6 wins away from a cup, and they got a defenseman like that who's now at North Dakota, one of the best programs at development in the country. Move ahead a few years. The Rangers now have the number 5 pick, and it's the pro experience for me. It's the phenomenal Olympic experience. Kenny Albert tweeted last night. He dug back into his game boards, like the spotting charts for broadcasters. He went through everything. I'll share the tweet later. That he played 20 minutes a night. He walked and commanded the blue line. He could do it on both ends. So he's two-way. He's not just a defensive defenseman with that size. And he played world championships. So he's played as much professional level hockey as you can to be ready. So I think it's exciting because you kind of know what you can get from him by October in a few months. Um, but I will say this, and I'm still kind of talking about it because it kind of blew up online when I was talking about it last night on the instant reaction. I'm just concerned that you took a defenseman at number 5, and I don't want to look back and say, why are we still not approaching with best player available? The one statement that I've come around to is that Chase Reed went to Seattle. He dropped 2 spots. Buffalo took Daxon Rudolph. That's what set this up. Has the star skills. He's going to take 2 years to develop. That's when Fox's contract actually ends. But with that said, you're waiting 2 years for this pick to come into the NHL to become your number 1 defenseman. And if he comes into the NHL earlier, or he develops quickly, or you re-sign Fox, or whatever that situation may be, his growth would be stunted. And quite frankly, I wouldn't really want him in Hartford with the current situation in Hartford right now. Like, I think that program has to build back up too. So I think there's good and not necessarily bad, but just I think some cautious optimism with the Schmitz pick. I've come around to it though, thinking that he can immediately help this team and that he is ready to be a responsible defenseman in the NHL.
The other thing I like about Schmitz is that from listening to a lot of the analysts talk about him is that he seems to like getting involved a lot on the offensive side of things, which I think is definitely a part of a winning recipe that we've had success in the past. He seems like he wants to be engaged. he operates kind of on that defensive first mindset, but he can bring that offensive contributions. And that's what we saw from a player like, Gustafson back, when we won the President's Trophy a few years ago. And that's what made us, really well. You saw Gabrikov step up and, in the games that he stepped up and he scored big goals, it just, when the defense scored, it seemed to, put our offensive at ease and seemed to get us, into a rhythm, which I do like. So I
Hmm.
think having a defenseman, like pairing, even with Adam Fox, you throw in another, defenseman that can help out offensively, I think that's going to translate well in terms of results. So I like that. Certainly intrigues me. We'll see what comes out of this. But I mean, it seems like he's strong, he's physical, he's mobile. He's played in 2 professional leagues this past season. Heard a lot about his leadership too, which kind of surprises me, especially at the World Cup or the World Juniors. I thought that is something that I'd like to explore a little bit more in the locker room, especially on the defensive side of things. So I'm excited. The NHL is not like the NFL, and even with that, all the leagues, it's hard to see, what pick's going to pan out. But especially here in New York with the Rangers, everything is with a big caution sign. But if first impression, I'm right with you. I don't have a problem with it.
And of course, like you said, you and I like to react more than get ahead, which I think is responsible to try and be as objective as possible. But there are some signs that this is a good pick, and we'll see how that works out in the next few months. Of course, this will be talking with some analysts that we try and get on here on the show for the rest of the off season. So, Steve, Schmitz, Dorofeyev, those were big moves. What does that say to you? What do these moves say to you?
Well, I'm going to echo what you said a couple minutes ago. It echoes that this is truly, going to be a retool and not a rebuild. And I think that is something that none of us want. We don't want to go through what the Blackhawks or any other, any of the other franchises had to have gone through. We don't want to go through the next 5 years of maybe making the playoffs once as a peak, and not being able to get back there in 3 years. We don't want that. And I think, especially, I think the Knicks winning it all definitely helps it out because again, it's the same management, after Dolan, kicks it back and says, the Knicks won. What's next? He's saying, what the Rangers are. We got to get the cup back. It's 53 years after the Knicks. How many years now for the Rangers? So I think that mentality coming from the top helps, and that makes me happy. But again, I feel like it's the same conversation we've been having here on this pod for the last 2 years. We want to go for that retool and not a rebuild. But I just can't help but to think, are we just putting a band-aid, on a bigger problem here? Next season is going to give us that answer for sure, 100%. If we have another disastrous season, that we've had the last 2 years, it's going to be very hard to avoid, the rebuild conversation, especially with players with JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad, and you still have pieces like Gabrikov, and Fox, but they're not permanent. They're not going to be. There's no
Hmm.
guarantee they're going to be here 5+ years. So this is a big year coming up, and it's all started with a big draft. And I was kind of a little. If there was one thing that surprised me, I want to get your opinion on it. I think I didn't have a problem with the first pick, but I thought we were very heavy on the defensive side of things. Offensive, we could always use center help. We were very, prominent on the defensive side of things. So I want to get your opinion on that. Do you have an issue with that?
I really like the center they picked. Um,
Me too.
Tomas Trenko. Um, but that was interesting. And then also picking a goaltender with your third pick in the draft was, I mean, did we really need help there? Like, if Igor tomorrow decides to hang him up, you have Garand, who I thought was great in his short, showings this season. So that was an interesting pick. I can't wait to see what some of the reporters kind of dig up on that as they move along the offseason here. But listen, I think it's okay that they're both trying to bolster the defensive side because you can never have enough defense like defensive prospects. Frankly, like centers we need, but I also feel like what this move sets up is at least showing that they're looking to cultivate a defensive prospect pool, which frankly we lack tenfold. I mean, Matthew Robertson was like this chance in hell that they drafted 5 years ago and finally broke through. But you don't get that often. And we'll see how EJ Emery progresses. He looks like he could be in the wings. You just picked up Schmitz, who can step into the NHL potentially, like we just talked about in the fall. But to have guys that could surprise you or can fill out the roster in Hartford and develop there, I like that. I don't have much for you on that though, because I think it kind of caught everyone by surprise. And I'd like to see what the reporters kind of dig up on, what information they get from the people responsible for making those choices.
Yeah, no, you gave me a great answer there. I do want to highlight because I had the same thought that you had. I was surprised to pick a goalie, especially with our third pick. I was surprised, especially how desperately and badly we need a highly skilled offensive center in our system because we are currently lacking. But I guess after hearing your thought process behind that, I guess you know if you're gonna take a goalie, in the third round or your third pick, I guess you're really gonna have to love that candidate. And I think you know we've always gotten lucky with goaltending. But I
Mhm.
do think you look at our prospect pipeline now. Garand is going to graduate and he's going to go to the NHL. He's going to back up Igor. We've seen this time and time and again. If Igor goes down with an injury, God forbid, Garand's going to step up. Who's next in the pipeline? So I think we've always had somebody waiting in the wings. So it seems like this kid has been a standout between the pipes. Could be a sneaky pick. I think if you're taking a goalie here, you're gonna have to really, really like him. Um, and you mentioned a great point about let's go to the second pick, Benjamin MacBeath. I think you mentioned about taking the best available player. I think
Mhm.
he was the best available player, at the time. That's why we took him. I think some scouts had him, um, going in the first round, and I think this could really end up being a steal for us. Snagging him at the end of the second round. It seems like his skating is a good asset. His scouting report seems pretty good. He's a left shot, two-way defenseman. He had good stats. I mean, his stats were really good when I looked at them at first glance. So that could very much well be a player that he was available when we had a pick, and we were like, you know what, we got to take him because this could be a steal. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on him there.
I got thoughts. I mean,
Awesome.
David Carl is about to make him a friggin' brick shit wall, dude. Like, the thing about the Rangers' pick of Emery and pick of McBeath is that they're going to be playing for two of the best programs in the country at the college level. The college game is only getting better, and we've seen how it turned out some great prospects for this draft. Gavin McKenna going first overall. And I know that's a conversation and a story for another time about how that all worked with the CHL transfer. But for the purposes of the Rangers and this pick, I mean, you have a defenseman now going to the best defensive college in hockey, multinational champion team in the last few years. Like, they are the premier of NCAA hockey. This is awesome. Like, I think that's such a great snag at pick 64. We'll see what he develops into. That's another exciting path. I like that you singled out McBeath of their draft picks because that I think is a sneaky good pick for the Rangers.
Yeah, and I want to also agree with you on Charenko, the center. I think he's another good pick. I really like that. He's not tall, but I think he's got some serious swagger and skill from watching his highlights and looking at some of his numbers and hearing what some of the analysts had to say and getting him in the third round. It looks like he's got some pop, so that's definitely an intriguing pick there. Um,
I got something to say too about
go
that.
go.
Statboy Steve was talking about this last episode. I love that they drafted a player with upside. He had a phenomenal World Juniors showcase. Like, he played awesome at the World Juniors this year. They drafted a player with upside. I feel like the Rangers never do that. I actually prefer, upon, like I just said, upon thinking about where Schmitz can fit in next year, that they drafted him over Bjork, who kind of seemed like that type of player, that went to Winnipeg at the number 9 pick. But the Carolina Hurricanes, their whole MO for the last number of years is just draft upside, draft upside. That's Jackson Blake. What school did he attend? North Dakota. That's Stankoven. Came from the Dallas Stars in that trade for Rantanen. Like, they traded Rantanen, who was the perceived star in that deal, and they got Stankoven, who was one of their leaders this playoffs, like on the best line in hockey in 2026. So I love that they drafted for upside, and of course, a center with pop. Like, I like that pick too. We'll see. Obviously, be monitoring where that goes, but it's very exciting.
It is. Any other draft thoughts here that you have?
I think the Rangers draft, like, this is a draft we hyped up. We talked about how important it is. But the reality is, as you mentioned before, we won't know until we see results. It's a very results based conversation. So it's going to take some time before we look back on this class and really make any decisions. But I like what they were thinking with some, like, where the mindset was on some of these picks. And I feel like Dorofeyev makes all of the draft house money.
Yeah. Now the final two moves we made, we did part ways with Adam Edstrom as well as Brett Berard. So I want to get your thoughts
Mhm.
on that. You were always higher on Edstrom than I was, so I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, you know what? We said it in the grades episode. Go check that one out, folks. We graded every player after the season, and I think we were actually, me and you got this one, man. We usually kind of suck at predictions, and we don't love them on our show. But for anyone new that's listening, but Edstrom, to me, Milosh came into the fold. You had Rempe already, who I think has played himself, like, out of favor of that role. He had the injury too this season, with the wrist that kept him sidelined twice long term. Edstrom just didn't grab it by the collar. Like, he has all the tools to be a great depth player. The size. I mean, he's what, the tallest Ranger in history, or second or third tallest Ranger in history. He had the speed. He had straight line speed, which you don't find at that size. He could score. Um, I just think Edstrom didn't grab it by the collar. Like, he played in enough NHL games for it to be a pretty easy decision here, that Milosh came into the fold a little bit younger. And I think Milosh kind of stole the show when Edstrom was out, unfortunately. So I think as much as I liked Edstrom's package, he never pulled it all together, never grabbed it by the collar, and now he's out the door to Broadway in Nashville.
Yeah, I was just always frustrated with his lack of consistency.
Hmm.
I just, even when he did get the opportunity to come back, because Sullivan did play him when we activated him off of IR. He just gave us nothing. And even when he did, it just didn't translate to anything. And you know, at the end of the season, you look at the how things played out. We gave all the playing time to all of our other rookie call ups, and he practically got no playing time. So um, I think this was just dumping what we don't need anymore. And honestly, these were two players that we don't really need anymore. I want to ask you a quick question. This is interesting. Whose ceiling do you think is higher, Berard or Edstrom?
Oh man, that
On
is a
another
tough one.
team, not on us.
Yeah. You know why this is hard for me? Because I think Edstrom is the easy answer, because I think you can't get by in the NHL just with size or just with straight line speed and being inconsistent. But I think teams will find use for Edstrom. I think why Berard has a lower floor and a higher ceiling is because Berard is an energizer bunny. He has to play like 9 volt all the time, sport mode, to get into the lineup. So I feel like if he's not, his floor is very low, but we know he can. The frustrating part about Berard that I said, I'm the contrarian on the show, and when whoever we're talking to. Berard, when I say grab it by the collar, I'm saying that in the parental guidance terminology. Like, something with the Rangers development is the development system we know. The coaching is a part of that. Setting guys up for success is part of that. But sometimes it's on the player. Like Berard played 13 NHL games this year, and I'll be frank, I know that that last season was not the best, but he did not make anything noticeable. Like his game, hitting, forechecking, stealing pucks, takeaways, off the wall play. And he proved to have a pretty good shot, good enough to score 5 goals the season before. We didn't see any of that. So I also feel like it's like the onus is on the player too in that situation. So I actually think Edstrom has more potential elsewhere because I think his toolkit, even if he's not playing his best game, will still be serviceable for the minutes he's playing. Where Berard still, I feel like, has to like earn his way into the NHL. I really liked Berard though. Like if I were to choose one to keep, I would have liked Berard in the system, but it is what it is.
Love that answer. I know I put you on the spot there with that question, but you tackled that very well. I would agree with you. I if I had to keep one player, I would go with Berard. I think you made a great point. Edstrom's toolkit will definitely, land him as more valuable and is more sought out on another club. For me, just skill just wasn't there. The skill wasn't there. You could even say that on some of the performances he had, when I think of Edstrom, I think back to that 2-goal game that he had against Vegas, where I think he scored the game winner in Vegas. Not this season. I think it was 2 years ago. Um, but even after that, you could say like, okay, those were one-off performances. I think Berard's ceiling is a lot more higher, but I agree with everything that you have to say. So I think with that, that'll wrap us up here on this episode of Puck Talk CS, and we've got plenty to talk here moving into the off season because the barrel is just getting started to roll. Because you know what's next week? We got free agency coming up. So I'm sure there'll be some more moves and rumors, and we'll be here at Puck Talk CS on all of our platforms, our YouTube, our Instagram, all across at Puck Talk CS. We got you covered. And always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.